so you can play.
Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and it's time for another Rules You Get Wrong. People often ask, rules you get wrong? Does that mean like rules you, the viewers, get wrong, or rules that you, the players, get wrong? And the answer is yes. And this is for our Chaos vs. Tyranids 7th edition battle report. It was the very first 7th edition game that I played, and it could only like Dave's third, and it was the very first one that we published, so of course we're going to get rules wrong. But also, a lot of comments that tried to point out rules that we got wrong were also wrong. So this will be very informative for both you and for us to be able to get the rules even more right. Even righter? Even more correct? I don't know, whatever. This isn't grammar you get wrong, this is rules you get wrong. So I have copied and pasted a ton of comments from both YouTube and MiniWarGaming. This is just the next day. I'm recording this on the Tuesday, but I think most of the stuff, because already we're getting lots of duplicates of people pointing out the same rules mistakes. So I just want to talk about them and acknowledge the ones that we got wrong and talk about the ones where you think we got them wrong, but we actually didn't get them wrong. And it's always hard when you switch to a new edition to get everything right, because you read through the rules a few times and it's easy to pick out like the major changes, but it's harder to pick out the small changes. Like if they remove a rule, that is really hard to notice, because how do you notice that something is no longer there unless it was something that was really important to you? It's a lot easier if they change it or add new things. So let's go through it and find out all the rules we, meaning everybody, it'd be so much easier in Tahitian, got wrong. Undead Pank says, don't you both roll to see how many warp charges you get? Nope. The player whose turn it is in the psychic phase rolls a d6, and then you both get that number of warp charges plus all your psyker mastery levels. Butler Pointer, Matt. Oh wait, this is what? I don't know why I read that as Matt. What? Vehicles can claim cover for ruins and a rubble and get a 4+ cover save just by touching a piece of terrain? Or what was the deal with the Rhino getting a 3+ cover save? No, you can't do that. I think we got that wrong. Vehicles, I know we got that wrong. There is still area terrain. It's not called area terrain anymore, but ruins give you a 4+ cover save if you're touching them. Sorry, not touching them, but in them. And so do trees. But vehicles no longer get that. Actually, they never did, even in 6th edition. They only get cover if they're actually obscured, if the side that you're shooting at is obscured by 25%. So there might have been times where we said that it was the fact that they're touching it that gave it, but they actually were getting it because you're shooting through terrain and they were covered. And there might be times that we got that wrong as well. As for the 3+ cover save, I believe that was in the first turn when night fighting was on, so it would have had stealth. So since we thought it had a 4+ cover save, then you add 1 to that and it gets a 3+ cover save. Craig Ling. Move through cover allows the unit to dismiss the -2" when moving or charging through cover. So when anything is moving through cover or a forest, let's say the highest dice roll out of the 2 is used, but you -2 to it. But for us NIDs, we now ignore that -2 and just take the highest out of the 2 dice now and not 3 that it used to be. I'm sorry, that is totally wrong. Well, it's mostly wrong. When you're charging, yes, you can ignore the -2. But when you're moving, the rule actually explicitly states that you roll an extra d6 and you take your highest one. Moving does not get that -2 penalty. Instead, when you're moving through difficult terrain, you roll 2 dice and you take your best one. If you have moved through cover, then you get to throw in usually a 3rd die. It says an extra d6, but there might be some special effects that's subtracting how many dice or adding how many dice you get. And so you add an extra d6 and you take your best one. The move through cover when you're moving to charge ignores the -2". Before, when you're moving through difficult terrain, you would roll 3 dice and take your worst 2 when charging. But now you just roll 2 dice and you subtract 2. But if you have moved through cover, you don't subtract 2. You still get to go at initiative 1 though, which kind of sucks, because the initiative 1 thing happens if you've moved through difficult terrain, not if your movement was reduced by difficult terrain. Blue Void. The Termagants had counterattack because they were in range of the Termagon. Would have been twice the number of attacks. You're right, I forgot about that. I'm just so used to the Termagants being nerfed that I don't think of them giving any special rules to the Termagants, but they totally did have counterattack. Craig Ling, why didn't you assault with the spore mines, Matt? You know, you made me kind of look that rule up, and I realized that it says that when they shoot, they just place the spore mines and then they just act normally for the rest of the game. And since they didn't deep strike in, I guess technically they're allowed to charge in the subsequent assault phase, which is kind of funny when you think about it, because it's like they deep striked, but nowhere does it say they then are treated like they deep strike. This actually says they just treat like their normal unit for the remainder of the game. So I guess they could have charged. Now, I don't think it would have been a smart move to charge anyways. I don't remember exactly what happened at that point, but if they were the only thing charging, then they would have just died, because the Overwatch would have just annihilated them, because there was even a flamer in there. If there was something else that was charging at the same time, but there wasn't, because the first turn I didn't charge them. So the reason, even if I could have charged them, I definitely would not have. Because 3 Spore Mines charging a bunch of cultists, like, they have toughness 1 and no save. So every weapon is winning them on a 2+. Plus he had a flamer, like a full flamer, a strength 4 flamer in that group. So he would have done D3 wounds on 2+. That's just not likely that they're going to survive. I like to use them instead to eat up Overwatch. So if I'm about to charge with something else, then the 3 Spore Mines would charge first. And he's like, well, if I don't shoot them, then they're 1 inch away, so they're going to get into base contact. And so he shoots them, destroys them, and that eats up the Overwatch, and then whatever else is charging can get in without getting shot at. In this game, of course, I fired in the second turn, and my barrage scattered and destroyed the 3 Spore Mines, and also 22 cultists, I believe. So I think that's an acceptable trade-off. Craig Lang also asks, or says, I'm not completely sure, but my thinking is that Precision Shot no longer exists, and the Tervagon is not a character anyways. Precision Shot still exists, but characters no longer get it. But yes, you're right, the Tervagon is not a character. I still get that mixed up with the previous edition. So that was, so Precision Shot does exist, but characters and independent characters don't automatically get it anymore. It's like things like snipers get it, and any models that have the Precision Shot special rule will get that. Masticina Akita, sorry, I didn't write, I found that's not right. I do like the battle card system. It definitely changes things. Now, that wasn't a rule we got wrong in what you wrote, but it made me think of a rule that we actually got wrong that nobody pointed out. And that is, when you're using objectives, you each get your own deck. So you don't actually draw from the same deck. Or if you're just using the table, you each have your own table. That means that each of you can actually draw the same objectives. That would have made a big difference, because I drew like 2 of the 1 objectives that he was sitting on. And that means that he wouldn't be able to draw those objectives because we were sharing the same deck. So for our first couple of games, we shared the same deck, and then actually Angel, and you're going to see battle reports with him in it, he pointed out, he's like, no, you actually use 2 different decks. And so I went back and I read the rules, and sure enough, he was right. You use 2 separate decks. So each of you get your own set, so you can actually draw the same objectives. I like that and don't like it at the same time. I kind of like that you shared one, because it made it even more tactical, that if you saw what your opponent drew, you knew you weren't going to draw those, so you had to switch your tactics rather than just having the chance to draw those as well. It made the game a little less random, but at the same time, if your opponent gets really lucky and draws all the ones that you can get easily, then that's really going to hamper your ability. Although it also hampers their ability, because that means that those are the ones that you can get easily, not them. So there's a trade-off. Of course, you can make your own rules, and you can say, no, we're going to share them, or we're going to have hidden objectives, or whatever you want. But normally, 2 separate decks, 1 for each player, and you're supposed to be able to see your opponent's objectives, unless the mission says otherwise. Thomas McDonald, all bikers have twin link bolters, then you add the meltaguns or flamers. That is not correct. When you add the meltaguns and flamers, you have to choose to replace either the bolters, or I think they're bolt pistols. And because Dave wanted to be able to have the extra attacks in close combat, and since bikes could only fire 1 weapon anyways, he decided to replace the bolt guns so that he would still get the extra attack in close combat, having both a close combat weapon and a bolt pistol. Nicholas Allen, vehicles that are dedicated transports for troops also get objectives secured, by the way. We knew that. The rule that we got wrong, I'm going to talk about a little later, and that is the spawn termagants, whether they should have objectives secured or not. Crimson Roamer, area terrain no longer exists. According to the new rules, models get a 5+ cover if they are 25% obscured to the firing unit. Better cover depending on the terrain type. That is correct and not correct at the same time. There is no longer anything called area terrain. But when you look at the rules for terrain, it talks about giving rules for ruins. In ruins, it says if you are in ruins at all, you get a 4+ cover. You don't have to be 25% obscured. If you are in trees, and you're not obscured, you still get a 5+ cover save. So that's essentially the rules that we had for area terrain, but they're a little more clear at the same time. I find that the cover rules overall are more clear now, and I do enjoy that, because the area terrain was a little weird overall. Mr. Hollywood 1717, shouldn't the Hive Tyrant had to take a knockdown test after taking the first wound around 2430? That would have made it easier, way easier to shoot. That is incorrect. Now, flying monstrous creatures only take one knockdown test at the end of any phase where they took an unsaved wound. So that includes the movement phase now, so it does add the ability to knock them down in the movement phase with, say, Vector Strike, but it also means that they only have one chance to be knocked down in the shooting phase after everybody is done shooting. So it's both a lot better and a little bit worse. So I think it's like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. So overall, it's better because you can go down in the movement phase, which would really suck. But now those Tau marker lights can't hurt you because it's only on unsaved wounds, not on hits. And you have to finish all your shooting, so you can't have like the guys shoot their bolters, you fall down to the ground, and then everybody else just mow you down. But they can still assault you in the assault phase if you do fall in the shooting phase. Viking Pain T-Baller. At 105, once you start allocating wounds in close combat to a multi-wound model, you need to keep allocating to it until it dies. No more wound allocation shenanigans. That is incorrect. And this is an interesting one because what you have to do is when there's a wound pool, which is all the wounds from a specific weapon at a specific initiative, once you start allocating wounds from a wound pool to a model, you have to continue allocating wounds from that wound pool to that model. Once that wound pool is done and we move on to another wound pool, say at a different initiative or a different weapon, you can actually choose a new model as long as there is more than one closest. The reason I know this even more 100% positive, like 110% positive, is because the Swarm's special rule specifically states that if there is more than one model that is closest, then you count the one with the least number of wounds as being the closest. So the fact that they actually specify it with Swarms, that you do have to do what you just said, which is allocate wounds to the model with the least amount of wounds, shows that because they're specifying it there, that they did not intend for it to be anywhere else. On top of that, there is nowhere that it says that you must allocate it to the same model. It's only the same wound pool. So what I did in that rule, in that game, was totally correct. You feel a little dirty doing it. You're like, I'm sorry, I know this, I should do it because it's the best tactics, but you know, it's kind of annoying as the other player being like, okay, fine, I gotta add more wounds and more wounds and more wounds until finally I've done 2 wounds to you, 2 wounds to you, 2 wounds to you, 2 wounds to you, and all 4 of you are still alive. That's kind of annoying, and I do admit that, but because the rules allow it, you don't want to just throw away your models just because you feel bad. Yeah, you gotta play it the way that it's meant to be played. Luke Schubert. You guys didn't roll the damage table results and the passengers of that first Rhino that got wrecked. They would almost certainly have been shaken the next turn and forced to fire snapshots. I think you are correct, although I don't think that you're correct that they would most certainly have failed it, because all they have to do is make a leadership test, and Chaos Space Marines are like leadership 8 or 9, depending if the sergeant is alive or not. So they would have been fine. But yes, if your vehicle is wrecked, you do have to make a leadership test. Otherwise, they'll be snap firing. Brenadin, Riccardi. I thought you only place spore mines if all of the barrage shots missed, not just the initial. Nope, you'd place it, the rule is very specific. It says if after scattering the initial barrage is not covering any enemy models, then you place D3 spore mines and you're done. So it kind of sucks because it could have still scattered over and hit the other ones, but that is the way it works. Bobby, you hit rear armor against vehicles in assault, referring to the Hive Tyrant versus a Defiler. That is incorrect. Against a Defiler, against a Walker, you actually hit their front armor, unless they are immobilized, in which case you hit their rear armor. Against any other type of vehicle, you are correct. You do hit their rear armor, but Walkers are special exceptions. Mechasonic 9000, you didn't make that charge of the Defiler. Difficult terrain is -2 inches. Your 5 needed to be a 7. I think what we did is, and you're correct, that you need a -2. But what we do is we measure the distance. In this case, it was a 3-inch charge. And so we said you need a 5-inch charge. So that might be a little confusing the way we worded it. Might have to change how we word that so it's a little clearer. But I basically add so we know what we need to roll, not what we need to achieve after the roll is subtracted. Erebus Kane. Unless those warriors had Furious Charge and got Strength 5 instead of Strength 4, I don't know how they could have damaged that Rhino's front armor. They couldn't have damaged that Rhino's front armor, but like we just talked about, in close combat you strike a vehicle's rear armor, no matter which facing you're actually at. Unless it's a Walker, of course. Green Knight, there is no more 3-inch move after regroup. Sure there is. If you really read the rules, it says when they regroup, they move 3 inches. It's actually quite clear. There's no more 3-inch move after they regroup if they have the "and they shall know no fear" special rule, the Space Marine special rule, where they auto regroup. So they don't get to move 3 inches and then 6 inches. They only get to move their 6 inches. Peter Bohr, You can't use warp charge dice generated from mastery levels to deny. Only those generated by the D6. So in turn 2, Dave only had 4 dice. However, mastery level can still influence what you need to roll. You guys did the whole deny part wrong. Now, in all humility, Peter, you're totally wrong. If you read the rules again, it says that the player whose turn it is rolls a D6, and then both players add their mastery level, and they get that many dice. So yes, you do add it when you're denying, which is why the demons, when they bring like a bajillion psychers, they're going to shut down all your psychic stuff, because even if they only have to roll 6 pluses, they're going to have like 3 to 4 times as many dice as you. So the odds are they're going to be able to stop most of your psychic stuff, which I think is a little ridiculous, but there's always something super broken. Fate Weaver. If I am right in thinking you're playing Contact Lost, which is the mission that we were playing, the second mission, then on the first turn, in addition to the 1 tactical objective you usually generate, you will also generate an additional tactical objective for each objective you controlled at the start of your first turn. That is incorrect. It actually specifically says that that starts on the second turn. You always only have the 1 objective on the first turn. Kurt86. Maybe I read the rules wrong. It's a funny way to start it. But in the roll-off for first turn, doesn't the winner decide who deploys first? Then when that's done, they also decide who goes first? No, definitely not. That would be like super overpowered, because I could be like, you deploy first, and I'm going first. The wording is a little difficult. You have to kind of comb through it and really analyze it to realize it's quite simple. That pretty much all the missions that I read, I think all of them, you roll. After you place terrain and after you've played the 6 tactical objectives, you roll, and the winner of the roll-off decides which side of the table they're going to deploy on. Then you roll again, and the winner of that roll-off decides who deploys first. Then you deploy, and then the person who deployed first, not the person who won the roll-off, the person who deployed first gets to decide if they get first or second turn. If they decide to take first turn, then the opponent can try to seize the initiative. But if they give their opponent second or first turn, then obviously they don't get to seize the initiative, because why would they try to? Because they just gave their opponent first turn. So it's pretty much the same as it used to be, except that when you deploy first, in 6th edition you automatically went first unless your opponent sees the initiative, but now you actually get to choose if you go first or second. So that's kind of interesting, because then you can see how your opponent deployed, and you can determine, do I want to go first or second? And if you choose to go second, then your opponent has to go by that. M. Vital. At 41 minutes 34 seconds, your Termagants are not contesting the objective next to the Rhino, as they were not bought with your points. The Rhino, however, was bought as a dedicated transport and has objective secured. This is an interesting one, because rules is written, you are totally correct. I'm curious, though, if they are going to FAQ it. The reason I say that is because when you look up the conjuration rules, it doesn't mention anything about whether the conjured units would be considered part of the detachment that the thing that spawned them is from. And so rules is written, you are right. They can't be counted as being part of the primary or allied detachment that the Tervagon or the Summoner was from, because it doesn't say that they are. So, but I wouldn't be surprised if they FAQ it to actually allow that to be the case. But until then, we have to play them the way the rules are written, which is that spawn Termagants and conjured demons, even if they are troop choices, do not have the objective secured rule, even if the entire army is battle forged. Ruahi. Can land raiders hold 2 squads? Nope. Because the cultists assaulted out of it, and then those marines came out of it later when it immobilized. What you must have missed was the cultists came out of it, and then those marines embarked onto it later on, and then it moved, got immobilized, and they came out. So definitely cannot hold 2 squads, so you just missed the fact that the one emptied and the other one went in. So that's all that I got for the rules that we got wrong yesterday. If you still think that I got some of the rules wrong in this video, then I ask you to please carefully read the rules before posting a comment below. And if you see somebody posting a comment below saying that something I got wrong, but you know it's right, carefully read the rules before replying to their comment, because so many mistakes we make are just things where we're like, no, it's not played that way, and you just, this is the rule that you got wrong. But what you should really do, especially because it's a new edition, so nobody has tons of experience with 7th edition yet, not a single person will have played more than a dozen or 2 games a dozen or a couple dozen games. So we all are still new at this. So we all need to carefully read the rules and carefully read the FAQs and carefully read our codexes if we're going to have rules disputes. So I hope that you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more 7th edition battle reports. Of course, we're going to do our best to get the rules right, but with complex games where a rule book is this thick and it's just rules, it's impossible to get all the rules right. And if you think, it's funny because some people are like, wow, you should be able to get it right because you do this professionally. All I have to say is, you take any of the games that you think you got no rules wrong, you record that and put it in front of 10,000 people, you're going to find rules that you got wrong, unless it's like a super small game with like 2 squads, and that's all it really is. It's just the fact of life, that there's just so many rules. It's so complex, some things are going to go wrong. So don't worry. Just report the ones that we get wrong and enjoy the battle reports anyways. This is Matthew from MiniWarGaming. Thanks for watching and happy wargaming.